I'm Magdalena, and over the Black Friday sales, I picked up a couple of palettes from I Feel Beautiful, which is a Canadian indie makeup retailer. One of the palettes I picked up is the Cradled and Ice palette, this palette here from Fantasy Cosmetica. I've been wanting to try their palettes for a long time, but nothing really was a color story that I would be interested in until I saw this one here. So as you can see, this one is definitely a very Magdalena color story. There's a lot of beautiful cool tone neutrals, some pinks, and some very purpley blues. I'm going to be doing some swatches, talk about each shade individually, and I'll throw up some of the looks I've done with this palette while I've been playing with it. The palette has 5 shimmers that are all kind of in that spicy neutral category. They all have a ton of dimensional sparkle in them, although some are a little bit more wearable than others. And there are 7 mattes, which are some of the best mattes I have ever used. These are extremely vibrant, as you'll see, but they're also a very user-friendly formula. I'm usually not the best at blending out mattes, but these ones blended like a dream. The first shadow in the palette is called Frost. It has a soft brown base and shifts turquoise, blue, purple, and magenta with blue and silver sparkles. Next is Frozen, which is a beautiful periwinkle matte. I do have a couple shades similar to this, although this one I think has the warmest undertone out of them all without going completely into purple. The formula is beautiful on this, and you'll see as I get into the other mattes that across the board they do have a beautiful matte formula, but this one is really nice. Blues and pastels can be difficult to formulate, but they really did a great job on this. Next is Hatchling, which is this super vibrant cherry blossom pastel pink. This is one of the most beautiful pastels I have in my entire collection. It's extremely vibrant. It's got a lot of white in it, but not in an ashy way. The formula is great. It's blendable. It doesn't get chalky or patchy. It's probably one of my favorite formulas I've ever tried and definitely the best pastel formula. The next shade is called Snuggle. It has a pretty strong rosy pink base and a turquoise, blue, and purple shift. It does have some sparkle to it, but not as intense as Frost. This next shade is called Glacial. It is an incredibly vibrant blue matte. This is probably the shade that really made me love this palette. Even if it's not a shade I would use all the time, this is just such an incredible formula. I mean, look how vibrant this is. This is beautiful. This next shade is Treasure. It's not one of those shades that I can really easily explain. It does have like a silver base to it, but then it has a bit of a pink flip, and it's also got indigo, purple, and blue sparkles. It is very sparkly, incredibly beautiful. From a distance, it kind of gives off more of like an indigo effect, and you can get a bit of an idea of what it looks like when you're wearing it in a look in the last look that I showed during the looks portion. The next shade is Adore, which is a rosy neutral matte. There's not a lot of exciting things to say about shades like this. I mean, they're pretty common, but the formula is great and it's a good shade to have. This next shade is Hideaway. It's a dusty plum brown. And while swatching it, I realized this palette has a lot in common with the BH Cosmetics Blueberry Muffin palette, which is now no longer available. That palette had a really interesting color story and a lot of shades with really unique undertones to it. I do seem to remember it being a little bit more gold in the shimmers. I think there might have been maybe like a khaki color even in there. But if you liked that palette and you would like to get something similar, or if you missed out on that palette and are looking for something similar, this might be an option. This next shade is Crystal. It has a brown base and a blue to indigo to purple to violet to pink shift. This one is super sparkly. I've built it up quite a bit here, but I think with a glitter glue you could probably build it up a little bit more, and otherwise it can be sheared out to be a beautiful topper as well. The next shade is Nest, which is a deep midnight blue matte. And once again, just look at this formula. It is so opaque, and I didn't even have to use very much product to get it this opaque. They really nailed the formula here, especially for a deep blue matte. Next up is Embrace, which is a deep smoky purple satin with turquoise, blue, purple, and pink sparkles. Lastly is the shade Layer. It's a very deep, smoky plum brown matte. I would call this a cooked blueberry color, if that makes any sense. Like when you have a cooked blueberry, it has that really reddish undertone to it. So, yeah, that's what I think of when I see this color. I really like this one for doing the lash line or for doing some liner. When you blend it out, it has that really nice reddish undertone to it. It's really pretty. I'm so glad they have this one in this palette because it's very similar to one in that blueberry muffin palette that I love. All right, and that is it. I have been really enjoying this palette even since I finished doing the B-rolls here and I'm now doing the rest of it. I have used it every single day. Probably my favorite palette of the year. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments, have you ever tried anything from this brand? Have you ever tried this palette? If you have, do you have any recommendations for me to maybe try next time I try something from them? Thank you again for watching. Bye.